Hi! So, hopefully, third time lucky today. Oh, dear, it's because we have both got a terrible cold. So, Emily is that little bit grumpier than normal, and she's not in the best of moods. So, I'm going to try and do this as quickly as I can. So, a student recently asked us how and when to use the passive voice in English. So, that is the topic for this Friday's Ask Us Anything Live at 10 a.m. or 10:15 BST. So what is the passive voice? Well, as you know, there are many tenses in English, but I'm happy to say there are only two voices in English, the active voice and the passive voice. Some people will say the passive is outdated and not used as much as in English now. But I actually disagree. In the right context, it is much better to use the passive voice rather than the active voice. So what is the difference between the two? The active voice is when the subject of the action is more important. It is the priority in the sentence. The who is the most important part. The passive voice is when the action is more important, and the who is secondary. Okay, so let me explain with this example. The dog bit the boy. This is an active, past simple sentence. We have subject, the dog, verb, bit, object, the boy. So we are saying the dog is the most important, as we want to know who did the action, who did the biting. Now, if the who is not important or unknown, then we can use the passive voice. The boy was bitten. Now, the object of the action has become the subject in the sentence. Now, if the doer of the action is still important, just secondary, we can use by plus the agent. So the boy was bitten by the dog, because maybe we still want to know which animal. You know, it could be by the cat, by the crocodile, by the shark. Personally, if you know who did the action, then you would use the active voice. But if you don't know what animal did the biting in this example, then the passive is best. Okay? So if you know which animal, then you would say the dog bit the boy. But if you don't, the passive voice, the boy was bitten, is the better sentence in English. So how do you structure the passive? An active sentence, as I said, is subject, verb, object. And a passive sentence is changed around. So the object becomes subject. The verb, we use to be in that tense of the verb, plus the past participle of the verb, and then if we need it, by plus the agent, by who did the action. So, for example, let's take the present tense, an example in the active, somebody cleans the room every day. Okay, the verb cleans is in the present. So we take the room, which is the object, we make it into the subject, the room. We use to be in the present, is, plus the past participle of clean, cleaned, today. We don't need to say by somebody because somebody is not important. It is unknown. And that's why the passive is better in this example. Because if you don't know who, use the passive. So the better sentence in English is the room is cleaned every day. Okay, that is the better sentence. This room is cleaned every day. Better than somebody cleans this room every day. Let's take it in the present perfect. Somebody has cleaned this room today. Again, the better sentence in English is this room has been cleaned today. So this room is the object, becomes the subject. To be in the present perfect, has been. Past participle of clean, cleaned today. This room has been cleaned today. Or the simple future. Somebody will clean the room tomorrow. The room will be cleaned tomorrow. and so on in the other tenses. So with the examples above, no matter the tense, it is better to use the passive voice because the person doing the action is unknown and not specific. So therefore, it is not important as the action. Can you give me 2 minutes, darling? So other uses when it's better to use the passive. No. Would be reports of a crime. Oh, Emily, that's very naughty. It's very naughty. Would be reports of a crime. So, for example, his car was stolen yesterday. Scientific reports or experiments. The rat was placed in the maze. News stories. New Orleans was hit by a hurricane. Or to avoid being blamed for doing something or admitting to something. So all the cookies have mysteriously been eaten in the night, as I said to my husband this morning. So you see, in certain contexts, the passive voice makes more sense. And the main point to remember is when the subject of the action is unknown, not specific, unimportant, obvious, because, when the car was stolen, it was obviously stolen by thieves. Or simply to avoid saying who did the action, use the passive. So I hope that helped and answered your question, Richard. And I'm sorry for Emily. And tune in next Friday for the next Ask Us Anything Live. Stop now.